Domino Thinking presents Natural Born Speakers with your host, Alison Donaghey. If you are born to talk and want to know how to build your career around it, then Natural Born Speakers is the show for you. Now grab your seat because this is the place to be. Now here is your host, Alison.
Hi, this is Alison, Natural Born Speakers. How are you all doing today? Really excited to have Amy, and I'm probably going to pronounce this last name wrong, Oestreicher? Is that right, Amy?
Oestreicher. No,
Oestreicher.
You
Super.
almost got it.
Almost.
Awesome.
That's close counts.
Oh, yeah.
Amy is a PTSD, peer-to-peer specialist. She's an author, an artist, and she writes for the Huffington Post. She's an award-winning health advocate, actress, and playwright. She's sharing the lessons she learned from the trauma through her writing and mixed media art, performance, and inspirational speaking, and used her one-woman autobiographical musical as a college mental health advocacy program. She can be reached at amyoes.com. So that's amyoes.com. We will mention that again throughout the show so you don't have to worry too much about it. The name of our show today is Building Resilience Through Creativity, How I Made a Beautiful Detour Out of 27 Surgeries. So let's welcome Amy.
Hi. Thanks for having me on, Alison.
Oh, thanks so much for being a guest. Really, really looking forward to hearing everything you have to share about your journey today.
Thanks.
Yeah, so if you don't mind, how would you like to just tell us about how you made it from where you were to where you are?
Well, I guess you would call that a detour, which is where I am today, talking about detours and setting up social media campaigns about detours. So let me backtrack to when I thought my life was all figured out.
Oh, yeah, that's always the fun part.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, mine started as a teenager where, I was my confident teenager that thought I had my life all planned out, and also a very big musical theater geek. So I had just gotten my college acceptance letters, and I was going to go to school for musical theater, and that was going to be my life. When I was 15, I had a very trusted voice teacher. When I was 17, he ended up molesting me, and I went completely numb. I left my body, and, glossing over, the many difficulties ahead, I couldn't even come to terms with what had happened and couldn't really tell anyone until months and months later. I finally told actually my mother when I was 18, and before we could really get therapy or anything like that, my stomach started hurting. I was rushed to the ER, and my stomach had ruptured. Apparently it had gone septic. There was a blood clot, and I was in a coma for months, and my life really changed what felt to me overnight, except when I woke up from a coma, it was months later. And I was still trying to figure out why I wasn't going back to high school or talking about where I was going to college. So the doctor told me, I didn't have a stomach anymore, and I couldn't eat or drink. They didn't know when or if I'd ever be able to again. And as a teenager, I felt like suddenly I was in jail. Like, what is this hospital thing? I was always healthy, and why can't I just go out with my friends? And what are these IVs? So because I really had never been sick, I didn't really know how to identify as a patient. And I think the scariest part for me was losing my identity. Or, I was always a go-getter. I didn't want to feel like a has-been at 18. So my way to keep going when there really was no roadmap and no kind of, treatment for me to follow or any kind of hope that I would get answers anytime soon, if at all, I really just used creativity because that was how I had always sort of lived my life as a kid. I was sort of the, musical theater ham growing up that just loved making skits and singing and dancing and performing. And even when I couldn't even, walk or talk or or really I was, feeling like a patient, even just, visualizing and remembering what it felt like to just, do what I love. I think that really kept me sane. So anyway, fast forwarding a really long time, it took, it's been 27 surgeries, 10 years, 6 of the past 10 of them not being able to eat or drink. And I've learned a lot about myself. But not only that, I've learned that, these little twists and turns and very terrible things in my life have led to new opportunities. I've learned things about myself I never would have known. I've met amazing people. And it's funny that when you're sort of prevented from, going the way you thought you'd live your life, you're sort of forced to explore new avenues, things that I never would have dreamed of doing, even just with creativity. Like that's how I discovered, visual art and painting. It was a way I found that was, I could express things that were too, painful and complicated and overwhelming for words. And creativity really became my lifeline to sort of, put all the chaotic events in my life together in a way that made sense to me, where I could make meaning from, events that maybe felt like they were meaningless or unfair. It was a way to, reframe my narrative. And so how I got to where I am in terms of, sharing it and talking about it and using what I've learned to help other people, I never anticipated that it would turn into what it is now. It really was a way to heal myself. What I learned is no one can heal in a vacuum. And to cope with years not even being able to have a sip of water, and being home in the real world where there were sinks and food and water bottles, I literally would lock myself in my room all day just to, shut out outside stimulation and just journal. And so that was sort of my way of just documenting what was happening. But, I was very isolated and it didn't really feel fulfilling because there were no people in my life, and it still made me feel sort of alien and not understood by the rest of the world. And that can really, prevent us from healing when, even if we're processing it ourselves, if we still feel so, alien to the outside world, I think it still, holds us back. So eventually, I ended up taking all those writings, combining them with songs after I'd been on the Today Show, and a wonderful composer on the show had written a song for me. I ended up writing and starring and directing myself in my one-woman musical, which I ended up calling Gutless and Grateful. And first of all, I had never really talked about what had happened to me. I'd written about it, on my own. I mean, there were some news stories out, but no one really had heard it from my perspective. And so it was sort of a pretty fearless move, doing it for the first time in front of, total strangers and New York theater critics, talking about, sexual abuse, what it was like after surgery. It put myself in a very vulnerable place. And, it reminds me of one of my favorite, actually, TED Talks by Brene Brown on vulnerability. She talks about, courage means to share who you are with your whole heart. And it did take a lot of courage, and I was sharing who I was, with my whole heart. And, because I took that risk, for the first time, I really started to heal, because I saw that, people weren't just in awe of what I had been through. They were actually relating to, emotions I experienced. Like they, even though they hadn't had such an extreme circumstance in their life, they could relate to the anger, the uncertainty, the frustration, the not knowing how things will turn out. And that was really what made me feel accepted again and finally normal. And I really credit, when I premiered the show to when my real, human healing started. So after that, I was hooked. I realized, wow, all this creativity to express myself was great for me, but now I really got to share it, because that's how I'm really going to integrate myself, back into the world. So once, my show got out there, I started talking more. I started, speaking and showing my art and writing. I ended up, doing a lot of freelancing. I started a blog and everything. And then I got a hold of social media, and then God, it created a monster. But really, just from a strictly kind of, speaking and sharing about this, it's been amazing to share, of course, because I seem to really be making an impact on people, but it's really been a transformative experience for me. And that's why I'm such a big advocate of that, everyone should at least start thinking about their story, even if they're not ready to tell it, just express it, even just for themselves. Because, once we can do that, once we can even just begin to articulate what's been rattling inside of us, whether it's just in a picture or a visualization, or if we're just thinking about it, it's really a way to reframe our narrative and really make sense of what may seem like, meaningless events. It's sort of like the idea that you learn better when you teach someone yourself. That, if you just tell, a friend what's happened to you, you'll be amazed that you can have revelations as you're telling that story, and suddenly you find what I call, the beautiful flowers on your detour that, when you keep it in, it may just seem like this was really not the way I wanted to go. And so that's what led me. And so I started to describe what had happened to me as a detour. And the more I traveled it, the more I described it as a beautiful detour because of what came from it. And people started to really resonate with this, word, just a detour. And I realized, why? Because, a detour is a very, innocuous thing. There's no stigma attached to it. It doesn't single out a specific kind of illness or circumstance. A detour can be a huge traumatic event, or it can just be a glitch in our lives or a surprise that just, didn't go as we thought. And it's not to minimize other people's, detours or compare, but it's really, I feel that, suffering is relative, and we gain strength in, traveling those detours when we know we're not alone and that other people have detours in their lives, whatever they are. It's not about comparing. It's knowing that we all have times where we're trying to cope with, when the rug is pulled out from underneath us. So that inspired me to start my little kind of love my detour movement, where I'm trying to, spread word that a detour does not have to be a dead end. And we might not even know where that detour is headed, but that's okay. I'm not necessarily saying that, you have to love your detour right now, because I know it's tough. And I've traveled my detour and found beauty in it, but I also have a few detours in my life now that I'm still traveling, and I'm still, shaking my fist in the air wondering, where is this going to end up? But that's okay. And I call someone who embraces that detour a detourist. And, and people, write to me a lot saying, well, I have this big detour in my life, but I wouldn't call myself a detourist because, it's really hard and I hate it right now. And, it hasn't really amounted to anything. And I said, that's not what a detourist is. All you have to do to travel a detour and be a detourist is you just have to show up. Not even, if you can just put one foot in front of the other and just, stay curious and see where it's leading and just don't try to backtrack. But even if you're I'm going to let you talk. Sorry.
No, that's okay. How do you go from locking yourself in a room because of that overstimulation from the outside world to getting on a stage and telling that whole story? Like, that's quite a jump.
Well, I got to tell you the truth. That was easier for me than actually being in the outside world and interacting with people. That was the shaky transition where I needed a lot of social training to get back. But, I was always a performer, and actually it was a really big healing resource for me. a month after I got discharged from the hospital, I was jaundiced. I had a big bag on my neck and IVs, and I still couldn't have a drop of water. I saw there was a local audition for a musical Oliver, and I could hardly walk at this point, but I convinced my parents to at least let me go, because I figured, even if I got ensemble, it would be good to be part of a community again. And they actually gave me the lead, and which was, we were all like, are you sure you called the right Amy? But I mean, I have that to thank for getting me through the first 8 months of being home and not being able to drink, because, I could actually, I didn't have like actual human things like food and drink, which drove me crazy, but it was a way to get through. So I think I've always been able to tap into that. But, following up on what you said, it was, it was strange for me to start actually interacting with people, because for years I had only talked to my doctors and my parents. And actually, when I met my husband way down the line, he was very patient with me, and I credit him to a lot of my social training again, because I must have said some things like when we first met that he was like, what? But, I didn't really, it's very different being on stage and performing and writing and presenting, which I did for many years. But, all my friends had, gone to college, when I was just coming out of the hospital. So I was very isolated even through all of that. And then when I actually got people in my life, that brought a whole new, layer of healing and meaning.
Right. Well, and I really love how you use that whole detour as part of it, because we never end up, like, we're all on a detour. Like, it doesn't have to be what you've gone through, which is highly unusual, I think. I don't even know how you would find anybody to identify with, because it is such a unique set of circumstances that you've had. But all of us are on this detour, where we start, where we think we're going to go, where we actually end up, where we end up ending up after we thought we were somewhere. It's all just such a very big detour, and I love how you use that as a way of talking about getting through your challenges.
Right. And why I started that, like you said, is, I didn't want people to, if they're inspired by my story, that's wonderful. But I didn't want people to just be inspired by it and be on this kind of pedestal. I want people to be empowered by it in a way where it's like, oh, if she could do that, I could do that too. Which is why, I'm taking the show, to college campuses, because I'm not, warning people that their stomachs will explode, but I'm saying, college can be a very stressful time. Oh God, that would go over well. College can be a stressful time where, we have to make decisions on the fly. Things happen, and we can't. And we need to know that we can keep going. A big question people ask me is like, how did you make it through? And I said, first of all, I've always loved this quote. I don't know who said it, but everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end. And I interpret that as, you just have to trust you're capable of getting through. But you don't know that you're capable until the end. So just have that, trust, and call it lying if you want. I'm a big fan of lying. I think sometimes hope, and my mother is like, she's heard me talk about this in the interview. She's like, well, maybe you shouldn't call it lying. Maybe like fibbing is a better word, or, like some
the stories we tell ourselves, right? And it's actually
exactly
had that line in that movie, the best marigold hotel or something, and I don't know where it came from originally, but they did have it in that movie. And it's been my mantra too, because you don't know where. It's just hold your breath until it's done, because when it's done, it'll be okay. I don't even think it's lying. I think it's just trusting.
An occupational therapist, actually, I talked to once, and when I was talking about that, she says, they call it therapeutic lying. In literature, you call it, like, for reading a fantasy tale, you call it willing suspension of disbelief. Whatever you want to call it, you can even call it, creating hope. I'm a big believer that, hope is not some kind of, like, fluffy word that we see on like Hallmark cards, it can be a job and you have to create it, and it's not always fun. It doesn't always come to you on the top of a mountain with the sun setting. Sometimes you have to make it. I mean, maybe creating is a better word than lying, but when I'm in the studio, I create something. Ooh, whistle. I create something when there's nothing there. And that's what we have to do with hope. And sometimes a blank canvas is intimidating, but that idea can be thrilling too. When we're talking about hope, it might not be so thrilling when you've really lost all hope. But again, it's a mindset. It's how you approach it.
Right.
And, as I'm saying this, like, I completely get that saying these things, it's a mindset, create hope. It's hard. It's not easy. I mean, I can talk about this stuff, but I can't always do it. I think we have to be easy on ourselves and, think about if we're traveling an actual detour, if we're running a marathon and we take breaks, we don't call that quitting.
No, you're driving down the street and you can't get through because there's some construction going on, so you have to take other streets to get to where you want to go. It's that same sort of thing.
Right, you don't just
I do
stop
have a
the
question
car
for you right
and
now.
say, I'm done.
Yeah,
Right.
I just wanted to ask you a question. I know you do a lot of speaking to different groups about these sort of things. What would you tell people when they are trying to get their story out? Because obviously a story is definitely a huge part of what you talk about, and it really should be a part of what any speaker includes in their speech. But how do you help people, or do you help people? What would your tips be about getting people to get their story out as part of their speaking process?
Well, one thing I've learned is, and I've come a long way with this, and it took time because, obviously what I've been through is so crazy. I would start speaking and it would turn into this laundry list of, everything I've been through, sexual abuse, my stomach exploded, all this kind of stuff. And people would just come away, especially when I was only allowed to have like 10 minutes, with their jaws open, like still thinking, can you start again at the stomach exploding? And I realized over time that it's more effective as a speaker to just zone in on one specific moment to really make it emotionally compelling, and really tell us what you were experiencing during that, instead of, you don't have to cram your whole life story into one speech. Give us a glimpse of what one moment is like, and it will stick with people much more than just, your whole resume or your whole life, and it's okay if you leave out stuff.
How were you able to do that?
What?
How were you able to do that? Because you do have so much to put into a story. So how are you able to just zone it down into a couple of things? Like, how do you decide what matters?
Well, honestly, first it depends on what I'm speaking for, and what is important. Like, I just talked to a high school about hope and survival, and I talked about at times that you have to create hope. And I found very specific events in my life, maybe even just two, where I needed to do that. I just actually had a callback for a TED Talk, and I found, there was one idea that I wanted to get across, and I found, maybe two or three events that showed that. And I'm terrible with omissions because, I like talking about everything, and I could talk forever. So it's hard, and sometimes the best way to do that is to get someone else to listen because, we've been with our story, we live it. So it's hard to be objective. So sometimes like the truth can hurt, but, get a friend and, just practice speaking. Sometimes it helps me even just, talking to people when I'm confused about what kind of angle to go at or where to start. And I find that as I'm talking, I sort of come to it myself. I mean, I think thinking out a speech can really just put us in a maze sometimes.
Do you do a lot of journaling with it, or is that something you recommend, or?
Definitely a lot of free writing and journaling. Like me personally, I try to balance that because also I'm dealing with dissociation and PTSD, which was, really affected me after everything. So for me, it helps when I'm actually present, like in my body, talking to people, or when I'm journaling, and when anyone's journaling, like I encourage them to be really mindful, like, be aware of their breathing, how do their fingers feel on either the pen or on the keyboard, and just being very present when they type. Even if you're just free associating about just random streaming of your life. Another cool thing is to do a mind map, and you can Google that online, but basically it's just an excuse to make a big web of your thoughts, maybe make some arrows. Like, I'm a big fan of just at least starting visually, even keeping an art journal. It's a great way, because sometimes, we sort of intimidate ourselves or just lock ourselves in an expectation when we all of a sudden start to write.
Okay. And so how do you connect with these venues? Because I know you speak at quite a few different things, which we'll get into in a second. But how did you decide where you were going to start sharing your story, and how did you connect with those people?
Well, first came theater, because, no questions asked. Like, I love the theater, and I never expected to, be on this speaking kind of circuit. That was never what I set for, because I primarily come at this from an artist perspective. Like, I always wanted to be on stage, and that's, where I wanted to see myself. This came organically because I realized, after my show, people would come up to me and start talking to me about, how they needed this at a time in their lives, and they wanted me to come speak to their group or even to their friend or a school. And I found that it was just another way to really get to talk to people in a more candid way than perhaps maybe doing a show. So again, that was I never thought I've been through this and I want to be a speaker. But, I found that it was another way to just, share what I had been through in the way that theater does.
Right. So I guess the message there is just get started, and it will take on this flow of its own.
And also, you don't start with an end in mind, hence the whole detour idea.
The detour, because you're not going to end up where you think you are.
But it's more than that, even from a business perspective, saying, my goal is I'm going to do this many speaking gigs. I mean, there's a point where you have to, make those kind of decisions, but make sure you're always aligning with your values. And because, the truth is, listen, there are a ton of speakers. What makes you unique? And I'm not saying discover that by making your marketing funnel and, your unique advantage, but I'm saying, like, what do you really want to share? And make it rewarding for you. Speaking should never feel draining. It should feel very fulfilling for you. What is your truth, and why do you want to share it?
Right. I think that's terrific. It's great advice. And I know you have is there any other tips you want to, before we sort of move on to the next phase of what you're doing?
The last tip is, people always ask me, because they see my name's all over the internet and stuff. They're like, how do you get all that? Like, what do you do? Do you have like a social media manager? Is there a scheduling? And I'm going to be really honest. I just don't have a life. I have a life in my show, and I'm not even joking. Whatever I do obsessively. So, I didn't just get there by hiring someone or having I don't even know. I know you can like automate kind of social media. I get frustrated. I don't know how to do that. I also like to be personal, but I decided I wanted to share my story, and I spent hours. I still do. Just researching. A lot of listening first, like see what people want, see the messages you need to hear, and then, researching, who else is in my field, what are issues being talked about, and then just, reaching out to people. And they're really and people really ask me this a lot, how I'm doing all this, writing for various publications, how, people are interviewing me, and all of that I did myself, and that's hours and hours and hours. And you might not want to do that,
Right.
But there is no secret. And if there is, tell me, save me time.
What's your favorite social media platform, and why?
I'm obsessed with Twitter. Well, it started because Facebook is, Well, Facebook decided to block me from sharing to groups every now and then because they think I share too much. So then I turned to Twitter, and Twitter has been like my saving grace. I love it. But also, it's a great way. Now I've actually, learned about different organizations and met new people because of that. They call it a little cocktail party for a reason. It's actually, I've never expected I'd be so educated by Twitter. My husband makes fun of me, but I find it a really great way to get information and meet people.
Right. Yes. Well, they are very different, and I guess do you find that they appeal to different audiences? Or
there is some overlap, but yeah, some people do have, definitely there is an overlap, but some differences definitely.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I
find that more and more people are getting on Twitter, though, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm. Right. Are you still doing your one-woman show?
I am. Actually, I'm really excited because at this moment I'm doing it in so many kind of different forms. I'm taking it to a few more colleges for the next few months while school's in session, but also I just found out that I'll be presenting it at some wonderful national and international conferences. I'll be doing it at the International Conference of Diversity and Disability in Hawaii in April. And then, which I just found out last week, in June, I'm going to be doing it at the National Mental Health America annual conference in Alexandria, and I'm so excited for that. And then I still get my theater because I just found out, too, anyone who's in New York, March 11th, Friday night, 9 p.m., I'll be doing it in the city at the Emerging Artists Theater, and all the info will be on my site pretty soon.
Well, and if you want to put that on my Facebook page, Natural Born Speakers, do you do any Facebooking now?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, they just blocked me from sharing to groups, but I still have my own page.
Okay. So, because I think that's where I connected with you initially, but maybe you want to post that on the page, and that will help people find you.
I have two Facebook pages. One is just Amy Oestreicher page, and then I just started because where I'm moving towards, with my Love My Detour movement, is I do want to make this a movement that is larger than my story, that actually eventually has nothing to do with my story, that people can really feel like they can start their own movement, maybe host a detour day, and all of that is to come. But for now, there is a Facebook page, so I also have the Amy Oestreicher Facebook page, but if you want to join the conversation, it's facebook.com/lovemydetour, and join us because we're a small community, but we're growing.
Nice. And you can post all of that so people can connect with you at Natural Born Speakers, because we do have some people following us there.
Awesome.
And I think it's great that you have this show as a way of getting your message across and connecting with people. I think it's so important that when people break into an industry and they're trying to get a message apart, they get a message out, that they do something that's different and unusual, so that they do stand apart, because there's a lot of people just going out there and just speaking, and it's good to find a niche. Yes,
and that's another thing. You don't compare and don't try to be, what is already there. Really come from your own. I came out of this with really no kind of comparison, because I didn't really know. I was sort of just waking up from a coma and figuring it out. I think that was a blessing. Don't look at what everyone else is doing. Just, find out, why are you doing this,
Right.
So,
yeah. Well, and you do, I think, have the unique position where you have such a unique story as well. And then with your background before all of this happened, being able to mesh those two together.
Definitely. And, I did learn there are some differences. But, in a way, giving a talk is really like formulating, writing a play. You can't just ramble. And I totally learned that.
Right.
And, even on my site, in my media section, I have my early interviews, and then now where the first ones, I think I said like and more than I said any other actual content word. The first one last month, my mother, my biggest fan, she listened to it. She's like, you didn't say one time. I'm like, let me listen to that.
It is a tough one, and you use that a lot when we're thinking.
Mm-hmm. We all have our little, thing.
Yeah.
And
I think it helps too when we can record ourselves, play it back, and video. I'm a big fan of people who are speaking, watching themselves on video, and then watching themselves with sound, without sound, and seeing what the difference is, because we all have those little things. And some of it is just really makes us unique, and we can hang on to it, but some of it is just really detracts from the story.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Body language is a big thing.
Yes, for sure. And it's amazing watching yourself and do your speaking without the words.
Right.
Because then all you're noticing is the body language, and that it changes everything.
The posture. For me, I didn't even realize how my posture was until I was seeing some videos. I said, "Oh my God, I better do some stretching or something, lift some weights."
Check out that. What is it, the Alexander technique?
As actors, that's one of the first things we learn.
Really?
For breathing. We all take voice and speech, and actually Shakespeare was a great way to just practice, the art of speaking and enunciating. Really deep breathing and coming from a really resonant place. As a singer, that was a big thing we talked about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I must say, it's always weird hearing your own voice at first. We all cringe.
It is. I remember the first time I heard my voice, I'm like, did I really sound that squeaky?
I remember I took a film class when I was younger, and I thought I was going to be scarred for life because the feedback, and they were, this was a very hardcore kind of TV training. The feedback I got, voice sounds nasally and tinny at times. And I was a teenager, and I thought, does my voice really sound tinny and nasally?
Right.
It's hard hearing that feedback, but it's how we learn. And breathing, deep breathing is just a wonderful thing to just be present and mindful of what we're saying. A good exercise is go through the day and how mindful are you of every word you say? Little comments we make, even things we talk to ourselves about. How mindful can you actually physically feel the words leaving your lips? Do they ring on your lips? Do they sort of tickle? Really pay attention to those felt sensations, and that will even just slow you down.
There's a woman that I listen to. I just listened to her MP3, and it's like she's having a love affair with her words, and it is so great, and she's very poetic, but it's the way she enunciates every single letter and syllable, and there is no word that goes unnoticed with her. And
you know what a good exercise is? Find a handful of words that you really love. Yeah. What words, forget about what they mean, but what words are just so enjoyable and fun to say? What colors do words represent for you? Find words that you think are just delicious, so much that you just want to eat them. and
so what are some of your words?
Well, I was just thinking as I was saying that delicious is a pretty fun word. Succulent, I love that word.
Yes.
This is random, but I think waffle is a fun word. Words with like a hard K.
Just got married, and they referred to their partner instead of lawfully, it was waffly. And
waffly.
So waffle has a whole different meaning for me now. Yes.
What words are embarrassing for you to say? What words are more difficult? Practice those and notice how your breathing changes. I recommend mindfulness for speaking and for life. Look up some breathing and visualization exercises and just start with that. Because I think as speakers, we have to realize that we have to approach it that everything we say, every word, even the breaths between our words are important and have to be done purposefully, especially when you're trying to edit your speech and craft it. I mean, as a playwright, one of the first questions we ask ourselves is, if this line, if this comma isn't driving the plot forward, why is it there? Otherwise you don't need it. Take out what is not necessary.
Right.
Every little punctuation mark should have some kind of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And, one thing I'll say one more about the Shakespeare thing is I took a first folio Shakespeare course, and you can look it up. But first folio Shakespeare, it's kind of a theory, I guess you can call that, that every little capitalization and punctuation note and break off in the line, there are no stage directions written in the text. And so every little punctuation mark and purposeful consonants, those were all actually clues to the actors of, to move stage left, to move stage right. And even knowing that had us approach like every little word and letter and order of words with a whole different kind of mindfulness. Really.
Interesting.
And it's a way to really add value to your speech, and again, a good idea on practicing, what sets you apart, what makes every word something that only you can say. And if it's been said before, if you think that, how are you saying it? That makes it different than everyone else. And I think, confidence people can smell fear, in a second. And confidence we can pick up. And it's very magnetizing. We gravitate towards that. So I think when you're really on top of what you have to say and feel confident about every little vowel, we could be talking about the weather. There's something very magnetizing about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So what's inspiring you these days?
TED Talks I got into really pretty recently, I must admit. And I find, when I'm taking walks outside, I just put them in my phone and listen, and I'm just so inspired when I want like a 10-minute thing. I'm also, I guess I should mention, I'm 28, but I'm getting a late start on college. So, I'm very stimulated by my classes. I'm very fascinated by history and memory and especially from a speaker's perspective, how we perceive memories and what is fact and how we are sort of arranging memories to drive a point home. So I've been very fascinated in just the, effects of memory, a lot about post-traumatic growth. I've been reading a lot of wonderful books on that because, there are gifts from trauma. And right. I'm very passionate. I'm actually, as an artist, I sort of feel like I'm not being fulfilled if, I'm not also creating something new on the side. So, just for me, I'm actually starting to make a new play that is actually a tribute to my grandmother, who was a Holocaust survivor. So I'm starting to just gather some things from family and think about what I would want to say. I think that's what keeps us curious, that, we've accomplished a goal and now we're looking for something completely new.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I love that multi-potentiality is a term, because I love that as an excuse for doing a million things.
Yes, for sure. Well, and talk about detours, like your grandmother's detour is massive.
I felt a lot of parallels to her story. I don't want to compare it to a Holocaust survivor, but, she was in the camps at 18. This happened to me when I was 18, and I was always very close to her as a child. And actually, this all happened to me on our Passover Seder, and she was at the house, and, she always visited us, and, my parents just sent her home in the middle of the night because they didn't want to, tell her what had happened. And, both my grandparents passed away when I was in a coma. So I never got that closure, which was very hard for me, but what she became, which is sort of what I want my play to delve into, is, she really became a symbol of strength for me that I could hold on to, and she was my symbol of hope. So, I want this play to be some kind of tribute to her.
Right. Well, what a beautiful thing to do.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully I'll do it justice.
And I'm really fascinated, too, with the way that we remember things. I remember being in, when I was at university taking psychology, and the whole eyewitness testimony thing. I remember doing a big speech on it and testing people's eyewitness testimony. And and nobody remembered things clearly. And then, but they created these very believable stories about what happened, and which got me then thinking about how do we do that in our own lives? How do we
exactly?
And it's, I think sometimes people think that we might be lying about things, but yet that's truly how we have morphed our memories around it.
Right. As a survivor of trauma, a lot of people thought, well, these details don't add up, or are you lying? And then I read about trauma, and traumatic memories are very nonlinear. Mm-hmm. So it may appear to other people like we're in denial or we're not remembering things correctly, but really at the time of a trauma, we're only remembering a collage of kind of sounds and images. And I think that's very fascinating because the truth is sometimes psychological truth is much more truthful than maybe a historical truth. Mm-hmm. Because in the end, we're the ones that make the meaning. But even historical truth, it's only from the perspective of the person telling the story who may or may not have actually even been there. Right. It's a construct of our society, of what we've been through. And as a speaker, it's important to know that like whatever we have to say, is true because we lived it. All our job as a speaker is to speak our truth, not offend people, but, speak our truth.
Right. Yeah. For sure. Well, and every once in a while, it doesn't hurt to offend people. It shakes things up a little bit.
Yeah, I guess so. Why not?
Depending on the topic and depending on the audience.
I'm saying that for my mother who listens to a talk and says, well, maybe you shouldn't have said that.
Oh, well, maybe that'll just send somebody on their own detour if they're hearing it, right?
There you go.
There you go.
And that's something, too. When you put yourself out on social media, you have to get ready that, people are going to say things. I got to be honest. One of the most hurtful things that I had someone reply to a tweet and said, it's disgusting how you're making 27 surgeries like a business, like it's a slogan, and you don't respond to these things. And that anyone can have an opinion, but it's hard not to, take that internally, when you're coming from a good perspective, but you got to have thick skin too. And it's a balance, because we're people.
Right. And, and everybody has their own story. And to have somebody say that, I just think there are so many things in this world really worth being critical of. That's probably not one of them.
There are all kinds of people, right?
Yeah. And all kinds of situations and all kinds of really, really terrible things that are happening, and people don't speak up to that. But then you have a title like that and people feel the need to chime in. But what do you do?
Hey, you have haters, and it means that people are paying attention, I guess, right?
I guess, yes. Some attention is better than no attention at all. Isn't that what they say?
Yeah, any press is good press. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. But
yeah, I'm just on that one. I talked to the dentist with the hunting stuff in Africa. Probably not so much. Now, is there anything going on for you right now that we would just like to take the next couple of minutes and promote or send people to where they can find out more information other than just the Facebook page?
Oh, yeah. So my site, amyoes.com. There's a lot of stuff on there. I get that. I'm actually working on creating a separate URL for Love My Detour. But for now, have fun exploring. You can learn about my show, Gutless and Grateful. And the biggest question I get is, well, tell me when you're taking it, near me. The answer is I book myself, and I would love to come to you. It's very easy. I even have a referral program where if you get me booked, you can get a private coaching or some customized art. And that's an aside. I also do private coaching. If you can't find the link, just send me a note saying I'd love to know more about your referral program, or I'd love to bring the show to where you are. And also for any detourists that want to be part of my detour movement, every Wednesday, I feature a story from a detourist. If you want to write a little blurb about any detour in your life and maybe what you've discovered or what you hope to discover, or maybe you just hate your detour and you want to write about that. Right. It's a wonderful community. So send me a note for that. And in the meantime, if you're on social media, just let me know you're a detourist and tag something with a hashtag Love My Detour. And let's really show the world that a detour is definitely not a dead end. And last thing, at the top of my website, you'll see if you subscribe, you get a free detours guide, and you'll also keep up to date with all my crazy updates.
Well, it sounds great. Lots and lots of things there for people to check out and to follow you with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely wonderful, and I've really, really enjoyed having you as a guest.
This is great. Thank you so much, Alison.
Oh, thank you, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Definitely. I'm going to check out your Facebook page right now.
All right, sounds great. Feel free to share whatever you want on there and help people find you.
Awesome. Thanks, Alison.
Great. Thank you. And I would just like to thank our producer, Nessa. I really, really enjoyed working with you on this and look forward to doing some more shows with you back here at boldradiostation.com. It's good to be back to Bold. And until next Saturday, speak up because you have something to say and we need to hear it.
Thanks for hanging out with Natural Born Speakers. But don't stop now. Contact Alison with questions or to be a guest on the show. Alison is also available for speaking engagements. Check us out at dominothinking.com. See you next Saturday.